Today's guest on the Totum Wellness Podcast is Scott Fournier. Scott comes to us with a BA in kinesiology from Western University. He's a functional range conditioning specialist and a DNS Exercise 2 certified practitioner. DNS standing for Dynamic Neuromuscular Stabilization. And whether it's an elite athlete or someone new to fitness, Scott applies his years of knowledge to help them move the best way possible. Scott, welcome to the Totum Wellness Podcast. Last time we saw you was at the Totum Movement and Performance Summit. You were a very well-received presenter talking about DNS, Dynamic Neuromuscular Stabilization.
He was one of the stars
Total star
of the summit.
And then you took off to get married.
I did. I did.
Congratulations.
Where I was also a star at the wedding, hopefully.
Good job.
You were number two.
Yes,
Good
number
job.
two. Yeah,
Exactly.
number two. Exactly.
But
no, yeah, exactly.
But an important piece.
definitely a necessary piece.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Yeah, it was awesome to kind of be welcomed into your family at the summits, and I'm glad it was positively received because I like talking about that stuff. And I'll be honest, the wedding was even better. So
I hope so.
Close,
yeah.
close
Top
second.
two experiences of life, wedding and then the summit. So hopefully this is like top three. Yeah.
Let's round it off. The top three.
Yeah.
Dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. What's a simple way to explain it to people?
To distill it into like one or two overarching concepts, I think the biggest thing is just like alignment of pelvis and rib cage, because it's basically about pelvic floor and diaphragm co-contractions and how they work together, and setting up basically like alignment dictating function as opposed to the other way around, and how like at 3 months, for example, we see the sagittal stabilization develop in a baby, right? So laying on your back, legs are up in the air. We call that a 3-month position for a reason. In all of the motor testing they've done, when baby sees bottle and eyes identify an object that they want to reach for, TVA turns on unconsciously, because now it gives you a stable platform that I can actually create movement off of. And so I think sorry, that was not a simple answer, but I guess for myself, it was like basically alignment dictates function. It's all pressure management system. And until you get that sorted, it doesn't really matter what else you're doing, because it all comes back to that foundation. So basically just like really good ways of how to brace and breathe, and then just apply that to everything from like physio rehab to higher sports performance to just gen pop. I want my back to stop hurting, whatever.
Right.
Great. And I think that, most people understand what the core is, right? So we hear that term. It's a very common term. Front of your abdominals, side of your abdominals, your low back.
Yes.
Right. So people think of that as your core.
Yeah.
And if I hear you right, we're expanding that to include those pieces, but also at the bottom, your pelvic floor, and at the top, your diaphragm.
Absolutely. Like if I took the lid and the bottom off that cup, it wouldn't be super useful at holding stuff, right? So there's a top and bottom component too.
Bottom.
And then I think just anecdotally, like it's not what you do, it's how you do it, right? So I've worked with so many people who are like, I came from years of pelvic floor therapy, whatever, and it's like they have no idea where their TVA is or how to turn it on or any of this stuff. So it's like, as much as the core is like here, it's like what parts of it are working and how, right? And so the people with like non-specific low back pain typically have very terrible breathing mechanics and no TVA access. So when they brace, they just lock down rectus and erectors, and then they smush their spine into flexion, and they're like, "Okay, I'm solid," and they can like survive in that position, but you're not getting better at anything. Conversely, you'll see with a lot of now athletes different, because you have to change your strategy for your sport. You're not trying to be the best like general pop aligned human. You're trying to be really good at sprinting, jumping, whatever, right?
Right.
So a lot of those guys or athletes you'll see really opened up in this like extension pattern, where we call it an extension compression stabilizing strategy.
So there, couple terms just before you keep going.
Yeah.
TVA.
Yes. Transverse abdominis, just the deepest layer of our core.
Deepest layer of those muscles in our core aligned in a different direction.
Yeah, like a weight belt. So like when you see people put weight belts on in the gym, it goes, the fibers run, or the belt runs this way. The TVA does that as well. So lives between ribs and hips, wraps all the way around to lumbar erectors, and is in that orientation.
I love that picture.
So horizontal.
It's horizontal. Yeah. Wraps
picture
around
it
you
like a weight belt. And then when we're talking about the athletes in extension, in layman's terms, that would be that they're essentially arching their back.
Think of a Usain Bolt or like a
sticking
really
their ribs a
Yep.
little forward.
Yeah, belt buckle looks to the floor.
Belt buckle to the floor. Or in general population terms, we'd be looking at someone maybe with a little bit of like abdominal, like adipose tissue. They would be in that similar format, would you say?
Yeah, well,
Possibly.
I think most people just default to like spinal extension or
Right.
tail kicking out.
Yeah.
You'll get the odd like sway back posture where it's kind of tucked under and there's a different weight shift. But
Right.
I think just in general with sitting and people's lifestyles I'm guilty of it,
Right.
where you're kind of pulled in that position, which short term can actually be like beneficial for sports performance. You're never going to see a sprinter win a 100-meter gold medal like locked in and like rotating.
Right.
That guy's an extension like crazy because he has to get to the finish line really fast. The problem is when like you spend all day like that as a general pop person in the chair at work, and then you stand like that in the kitchen, and then you go and you throw a bar on your back and you're like that again, and then you're just loading the same thing all the time. So I don't think it's like a bad position on its own, but in the context of, if you're always like that,
Always
and then you're
like that.
just overtraining.
Overuse.
Yeah. And then I think it does wind up like basically erectors and rectus become like your core and your body can't really access TVA. We'll get into it with some of the practical stuff, but changes the alignment of the hip. Now it's harder to find glutes because the joint's never centrated. Like you're always in a bit of hip flexion if your tail's kicking out the back. So just little things like that, I guess. It's like it helped me start to recognize almost just like shapes or patterns that you would want to strive for most people. Obviously it's highly like individualized.
Right.
But yeah, basically like alignment and pressure management would sort of be the core principles. And then it's just like, what sort of movements are you trying to integrate onto that would be the core of it.
Okay, let's go to the simple stuff, the TVA.
Yes.
Because that's the one, would you say that most people are missing the understanding of that?
Oh, for sure. And
Okay.
I mean, I'm fortunate that I've been doing this for not too long, but relatively long time in my lifespan. And I've been exposed to a lot of really awesome education and good teachers and stuff. And it's still something that like only in the past few years have I gotten a good handle on, like in my own body and how to coach and cue and whatever and others. So I do think it's like pretty nuanced, and it's just that a lot of it doesn't really get touched on. And I think without that layer, it's really hard to build stuff on top because you wind up defaulting to your previous patterns.
You're starting with a new person.
Yep.
They're lying on the mat.
Yep.
And you're saying, okay, let's just say they have low back pain, because that's probably one of the most common reasons that people would be interested in understanding this. And what would you do to help them understand where their TVA, transverse abdominis, is, and then how to engage it? What would be your top kind of 3 things that you would do?
Is this me assessing how they use it, or me just teaching them how to use it?
Teaching them how to use it.
Don't know.
We're assuming they don't know. We're assuming
Perfect.
like 90% of the population doesn't know this.
Sure.
They're going to love this podcast.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, I mean, it's like there's definitely a position I would go into, which is like highly practical and visual, but I'll walk you through it as best I can. So yeah, like supine or laying on your back on the floor is a really good place to start. It just the floor gives you feedback mechanically. Right. You have something pushing into your ribs, your pelvis. So it lets you like figure it out. It's pretty hard on your feet because now you have to manage your like vertical balance organization. There's so much to it. Whereas on the floor, it's like kind of a baseline, right?
Okay, perfect.
So starting back,
the floor. Yeah.
The 3-month position would be like a tabletop or like a dead bug, like basically just knees up at 90 degrees, like you're in a chair that fell over backwards. What I would do is I'd be like next to the patient or client, like kind of next to like pelvis. And then I put my leg under their legs to support it. So they don't have any tension.
Right. So, so someone at home could do
this. Or
by
with a chair or a bench.
Basically you're bending your knees at 90 degrees. You're lying on your back, knees are bent 90 degrees, and your feet are up on a chair.
Yeah. Or against a wall.
Or against
just
a
something,
wall.
Something supported, but where you're at 90 degrees. So you don't
have to hang on to them.
Exactly.
Because we all know that's not super easy.
Well, that's just when the back pain will kick in and all that stuff, right? So you basically want to get in this really user-friendly position, but without having to manage any tension on your own.
So you're fully relaxed.
You're chilling as best you can.
Okay.
From there, I would get them to put their hands on pelvis so they feel some bony landmarks, grab ASIS, just stuff you can grab.
Yeah. So like the top of what people sometimes call their hip bone.
Yeah, like the elephant ears portion of your pelvis.
It's basically you're putting your hands in your waist.
Yeah, the first like bony thing you can feel.
Yeah, first bony thing. Yes. Okay. Just below your waist.
So that's the epicenter of all of it, right? That's where our tailbone connects. That's our pelvis. That's where the hips live, all this. So like extension would be if there was a big gap between your low back and the floor. Flexion would be if there was like, it was pushed into the floor. You generally want them to find somewhere in the middle.
In the middle of that.
And depending on what drives their back pain, there'll be a position that's more comfortable than others. So you kind of let the person figure out like, here's where I'm actually the most comfy.
Got it.
Unless it's some like ridiculous looking shape, I'd just be like, okay, cool. Let's call that your neutral right now, right?
Okay.
Cueing wise, so like if you then move the hands inside that same bony structure, I usually try to pull them apart. Not very hard, but I'll put my thumbs like you can literally hook inside those bones. And if I just put a bit of pressure out, remember the TVA goes horizontally, right? So you're trying to pull it, you're almost like loading it eccentrically,
pulling it
even
apart.
though nothing's moving, but you're just, right. And then I'd say, pull my hands back together, like pull the hip bones back towards each other.
You physically are your fingers in, pulling those bones outwards, and you're asking them.
Because then it gives tactile feedback. And you say, pull against my hands.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Okay, I'm doing it right now.
Because otherwise, I find it really difficult you're throwing all these like, it's like you're walking into a cold lake, you're picking up a cherry. And like people, depending on what you're into, like people might not know what that is, right? And guaranteed, almost guaranteed, the majority of people just lock down rectus. Like you're like, okay, brace, and they just brace.
Yeah.
And then you can't get in there anyways. So I just try to stay as relaxed as possible, put pelvis in a position where you want the TVA to hold it, and then just it would be like anything else. If you're trying to find a pec.
This is a good cue. Okay, so I'm so old that I'm back in the day. Remember when we used to put the blood pressure cuffs under the low back?
Yeah, of course.
Then you measure.
I'm almost of that age.
Like,
so yes.
Oh my God, so much. And then you'd get somewhere and be like, oh, where's my blood pressure cuff? Oh, now we're screwed.
So I think all trying to accomplish that.
This is better.
So yeah, I just find the tactile cue.
Yeah, I like that.
That's a really
like
good
if you were trying to teach someone to hinge, you would like give them a restraint or a cue of like pulling them into a hinge, and then they could like push it forward. It's the same with the TVA.
Same with TVA. So you're just pulling kind of essentially those two, what are technically ASIS, but what lots of people call their hip bones, apart. And then you're trying to pull them back together. That's a great cue.
Yeah,
okay.
Nice.
We have mastered that.
Yes.
Now what?
Yeah. So now it's just like, and typically like you want to see how that impacts their back pain, right? Because some people are super sensitive. The minute you add more tension, it's like, oh my God. Or if they do it right, and depending on what's up, it can also be quite decompressive.
Yeah.
And so some people, you're like, oh my God, actually, that feels way better, even though I'm like not really doing anything. And so you just kind of assess like how that goes. Let's say they get it. And then it's just about trying to add load to the situation. So if your feet are on the wall, just can you lift one foot off without pelvis shifting?
Right.
And so the goal of the TVA is to like prevent unwanted movement, right? So we haven't talked to any of the ribs, like set that up and then you would get the ribs tied down, and like that doesn't work if I'm still way up here. So you do get the whole core involved, but just starting with that hip bone pull is like a good one.
Yeah.
And then progression would just be, can I remove one leg, either lift it off the bench if it's resting on it, or pull it off the wall,
right?
If that's where it is. Can I do both? Can I do it for like a couple breaths now? Can I hover both feet and just take 5 big expansive breaths where I actually feel myself expand laterally instead of just like chest breathing? And so, just working from there. And I think it's highly individualized on how quickly a person progresses. I think then the goal is to get them off of like a supine position and see if they can still maintain that, to see if it translates. So then you can get into, various quadruped things, side lying things.
Hands and knees.
Hands and knees, all fours.
On
your sides, half kneeling, like, so basically these transitional positions, which this would be very like DNS system wise, because your brain kind of learns in like certain positions, right? Tim, I think you play a bit of guitar. It's different to play guitar seated and standing, right? Yeah. If you could be like an absolute maestro seated, you stand up and you're like, what is this instrument? So body's kind of similar with motor learning, where you can be a TVA rock star in a 3-month position, and then you get up and it's like, now what? And so I think the dance is being able to like bring people along the continuum, transitioning, because the end goal isn't to be like the best dead bugger on the planet. It's to do your sport or whatever with with no pain, right?
Right.
So
to move like Roger Federer.
there you go.
And those types of athletes, the common theme is they're so athletic that they can overcome all these deficiencies.
Master compensator, right? So
is it harder to work with somebody that is a very competent athlete / mover that has an issue versus a everyday person that, they're not the best tennis player in the world?
That's a good question. And I have been fortunate to work with some like professional athletes, some collegiate like scholarship athletes, and then absolutely zero athletes in my day-to-day. Age range from like, young, like 13, 14-year-old volleyball player to I've got a few like mid-70 kind of casual golfers. So I've definitely seen that spectrum, which is nice. To be honest, I've always had a really easy time with the athletes. I think they're just so friggin' smart motor control wise.
Right.
And they're so in tune with their body that as much as they've got really good like compensatory patterns, the minute you say anything about their body, they're like, got it. And they figure it out.
They fix it. And I would say too that a high level athlete coming to you for this type of training has self-selected in that they've tried they've mastered all the other stuff. And now they're taking things to the next level.
Yeah, for sure.
So some of the athletes that use this regularly, like we know Roger Federer has trained in this.
Okay.
And I would say when you watch him move, I think he's one of the best
no doubt.
movers out there. And I think for an athlete, I'm guessing this, but it would probably make them a lot more efficient in their actual. So for a tennis player playing in extreme heat, it's probably going to give them a huge advantage over a tennis match because they have everything stacked up properly. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. The one of the terms I've heard from the DNS world is just like basically the functional capacity of something. So it's not like how long can you go, it's how long can you go with like relatively optimized form. And so, and then what happens after that? And it's like the athlete that has that higher functional capacity is usually the one that wins, not just the one that has like the highest overall capacity. Because if your movement goes to garbage and you can go farther than the other guy, but if he stays a lot cleaner and more efficient for longer, depending on what the sport is, that one's going to win, right?
Less error.
Yeah, less error. So it's kind of like raising the floor as opposed to just like lifting the ceiling, where it's like, how long can I stay optimized? Just because like the whole point of alignment is to optimize movement. It's not just to be like, wow, that looks really good. It's like now things are just as efficient as possible.
Right.
And so it's the athletes that can stay as efficient as possible for longer that typically I think succeed or don't get hurt as much.
And then the conditioning around that. So teach a good athlete some of these. Okay, you've been compensating like this. Yeah. We need to do these things to change you. And then train them over a long, like give them the endurance, like if tennis is the example, so that you're going to do a 5 set, it's 2.5 hours of constant movement, basically. Yeah. Getting them to the 2.5 hour or 3 hour mark so they can handle all versus the 2 hour mark and then things start to fall apart.
Yeah, totally. It's like the same concept as just like old school S&C training where it's like you'd have like, if you had your like build phase, your power phase, your strength endurance phase, whatever. I mean, these are all just muscles and coordination, just like everything else, right? So it follows a very similar pattern where if you're training like a power lifter, you probably don't need a boatload of endurance on these stabilizing muscles, but you need crazy output for a short period, right? If it's the tennis thing, I mean, you're going to be slow. Your alignment is much more open. You're all over the place. It's more dynamic, but you need to hang on to it for way longer. And so I think that's when you would just get specific around like the programming aspect of it. I deal with primarily just general pop people, which is great. So within that, there's a large spectrum, right? Some people are like weekend warriors. Some people are very heavy into like tennis or recreational sport. But
high rocks.
I actually have no high rocks policy. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't. Just whatever you want to do with your body.
Right.
So back to the general population versus elite athletes. So everyone can understand the 2.5 hour tennis match.
Yep.
The 8 hour workday in a desk, right? That's hard, right? So if you're learning some of these new movement patterns, how do you translate that into an 8-hour day.
Yeah.
Because if you've identified, look, you sit too much, sit too long, you get weak, things fall apart position wise. You don't even know that that's happening.
Yeah.
And now you got some chronic pain.
Yeah.
Is it the same thing? You train basics slowly but surely, build them up over time?
No, I think it's a wicked question. I mean, human bodies are like pretty adaptable for the most part. And I think if you're giving it the right inputs, it doesn't need a whole boatload to like make noticeable change. Like if this TVA has never been on before and they've never been out of extension, the minute you give them like an hour of that, their body hangs on to some of that new change, right? So I think it does actually, like, practice makes perfect. You obviously need enough time and volume to force the body to adapt. But I find, like, if they're coming from like a no training background and there's just like non-specific low back pain and you're introduced to this stuff properly, like right off the bat, you notice some changes. And then you just equate it to like, if you're trying to learn any other language, you need little, like, frequency of exposure is important instead of intensity, right?
Right.
So did I try to learn Italian before my trip? No, I did not. But if I was going to try, it would make a lot more sense to spend like 10 minutes a few times a day looking at a few words than like once a week sit down for 2 hours and be like, okay, head in the books, let's go.
Got it.
Right.
And so I find with motor learning, it's very similar. So if that person has
analogy.
30 seconds to stand up and try to find their TVA every like hour or two, that actually goes a long way in them like then understanding it.
That's great. And that's a simple thing that you could do, which would also encourage them to stand up.
Yeah. Or like
which we
push
know
your
helps.
office chair back, lay on the floor, put your feet on the chair, do the dead bug thing,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
So I usually just recommend, like, if you can get some practice reps in, intensity doesn't matter, but frequency
I like
does.
that.
And yeah.
There's this concept that we talked about at the summit of the piston effect,
Sure,
which I'm guessing, I didn't do my homework, is a little bit related to breathing.
Yeah, I think this would have been a Dr. Waj
Yeah.
throw. So actually, I haven't heard that term, but we can figure it out together.
Yeah, I like
Canister piston, like there's all sorts of
piston. I think that's a really good visual for some people. If you've never thought, like let's face it, most people, when you say abdominals and even when you say core, the image is six-pack.
Of course.
In their head. Okay. So if we look at this as a piston, we've got your six-pack.
Yeah.
Then we've got, transverse obliques. Then we're coming around to the erectors, your
QL
back
stuff,
muscles,
yeah.
QL. Basically, let's just say your back muscles. Okay. So that's going all around your trunk. Then we've got the diaphragm on the top, which looks like kind of like two almost like balloons.
Yeah, like a big dome.
In a way, a dome. Yep. And then the pelvic floor on the bottom, which is a single dome. So kind of like two domes, one dome on the bottom.
Yeah.
And what has been described is that with breathing, we can change the pressure in these systems.
Yeah.
And that also allows us to be a more effective mover or potentially decrease pain when we're swinging the golf club.
Hugely.
Right?
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd say that makes up like the vast majority of everything I do with people. So I would strongly agree. Can't go too general here, but like in general with low back, like typically tissues that are really short and always on are going to grab very quickly and your body will actually offload a lot of work onto them because they're already sort of like there, right?
Right.
And so I think a lot of people have their bodies sort of swapped out like their TVA and their hips for like rectus and erectors. And so when you look at the golf swing, like basically if I'm living an extension in that tail out position, I've already put a bunch of tone on those muscles and I've taken away joints or taken away space in the joints, right? My posterior vertebrae are now closer together. I'm an extension. So now no matter what I do, if this is the front of me, this is the back of me, if I'm here, even rotation, side bending, everything is going to be coming from this really short position, which is like, ooh, now it's grabbing. And that's what I notice with people is just like, it's those tissues that are already really short. When you ask them to do their normal job, they get a bit grumpy.
Right.
So to actually create the piston, like from alignment where most people would probably feel like they're actually too tucked, but it's just because it's relative. Like if your body thinks this huge anterior or forward tilt is neutral, when you go to neutral, it thinks you're posterior, right? So people have to get their head around that. But now if I create that space and it's kind of neutral, now when I rotate and move and bend, I've got equal balances of tension. There's nothing that's like going to grab too early or try to help out too much. So I think as much as the piston thing is important with all the tissues you mentioned, but it's also like, how do you fill that out with pressure? And that's where the breathing and pelvic floor stuff comes into play.
Well, and I think the visual on that is you think about blocks, square blocks being stacked, but an inch in between each of them.
Sure.
When you say extension, the back side of the block is bending towards the block below it.
Totally.
And inflection, the front side of the block is bending towards the
so
one below.
You're in both movements, you're creating and taking away space just on other sides of the joint.
Which when you do repeated, especially high load activities, you got problems.
Can be an issue. And then just same thing if you're like, now if you were to ask one of those blocks to spin, but it was tilted on its back next to the other block, like that's going to be a different action than if the blocks were flush with each other spinning.
Yeah.
Right. Which would be the golf swing or swinging a baseball bat or even just twisting, which we know is the most common time a person will go into a back spasm or injure something in their back.
And it's like, why would that happen, right? Because it's used to being short, and then you've asked it to lengthen.
You've now
Whereas if
asked
it just
it to
lives in this
lengthen
longer position, it's like, oh, I got it.
Where it's supposed to be. And I often talk to patients about this, that your spine is so interesting how it works together and it has so many great functions. And the way the bones sit is designed to be in those correct...
we need a shock absorber system to
exactly.
it too, right?
They're designed to be in that correct spot.
Yeah.
When we constantly move them out of that spot, they do two things. They'll send us signals that they don't like being out of that spot, which is pain, usually the signal. And we do see weakness, higher susceptibility to injury with a movement that maybe didn't bother you kind of like 5 years ago. All of a sudden you go to do it. Now you have weakness there.
Yes.
And I think another interesting piece, which people can understand with knees. So if we look at a person standing and say they are what would be called like bow-legged or knock-kneed, we can see wear and tear on the bones from that shape.
Right. So that model would stay consistent.
Right. And I think everyone can visualize that if every day you're walking and your knee isn't straight on top of the bone below it, you're going to wear out the outside more, you're going to wear out the inside more. And we understand that, or you're going to wear out your meniscus or whatever. And the spine is exactly the same.
Yeah, for sure.
Is that after 30 years of being in the wrong position, you're going to see vertebrae that have actually changed shape. And we call it wedge vertebrae. And once you get to that point, it's really hard to change that.
Of course. Well, because now there's like a structural
bone remodeling.
Right? So,
Not to say that it's never too late to do these things, but I think that visually, if we think about that, so if we think about the piston and then the spine is at the back of the piston, we definitely want things stacked where they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And if it's not, we're going to potentially run into big problems.
I'd say, and even if there was not big problems, you're just losing efficiency
and losing
on it,
efficiency.
Right? So and it's not that like you have to be a crippling back pain patient to benefit from it. I think it's just like overall human performance, if that's playing a sport or just like going up and down the stairs. You're just leaving efficiency on the table if you're not aligned. Like there's, like you said, there's a reason these bones are set up a certain way and the tissues are certain lengths and tensions. It's to just do a job that they were meant for, right? So if you can just continuously bring them as close to baseline as possible, it sets up your body now to move how it was designed. And I'm also a huge believer, like there's so much variance and it's absolutely not like neutral spine or die. Like there's so much cool movement optimism, and I'm all for that. I've come from that in my own body. But it's when someone comes to me with a specific issue, then you're like, okay, now we're allowed to make some hard and fast rules and try to fix that, right?
I'm very curious about this because as you were talking earlier, in our the rehab side of our business, if somebody presents with a non-specific shoulder pain, right? So they didn't have an incident where they hurt their shoulder.
Right.
It's just like their shoulder pain has developed over time.
Yep.
We know that sometimes it's not actually the shoulder that's creating that pain.
Right.
It's somewhere else in the body. So when you're talking about this new version of core, the piston, as Stacy's saying, this top, bottom, side, front, etc. If that's not working well and I roll my ankle, and I did that 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever else, and I've got this minor 5% deficiency in movement on that ankle. Like, is that translation through my non-optimal core potentially causing my shoulder problem?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think we know kind of the answer to this. I mean, yeah, everything's obviously so connected that in this balance game, like posture is just a game of balance, right? Where your nervous system is just trying to keep certain structures on top of other ones. And so if you kick out the table leg, it's going to look different. If we do that to an ankle, you're going to walk different. Is that enough to cause like the shoulder thing? I mean, that's probably your guys' best chance to assess that stuff. Right. You know that better than myself. In my head would go to like, that's just like saying my hips hurt because my pelvis is in the wrong spot, right? If I've got non-specific shoulder pain, my shoulder lives on my thoracic cage.
Right.
So it's like, just like my hips live in my pelvis. So, you know, the upper body version of someone rolling their hips into that big anterior tilt is having a huge rib flare. If my shoulder lives here or on a body that's here, that is a very different length tension relationship in that joint, right?
And that's kind of like shoulders
totally.
Chest forward or shoulders chest back.
Either or, you're just not in this optimized position. I like the shoulder's a pretty complex joint, right? Hip is a ball jammed into a socket. Shoulder, there's like 3 parts of the socket and 2 of them move, and there's a lot going on. And that's where I think, and then plus when we sit, like most people miss a little bit of hip extension, but in general, they're like, they walk at some point during the day and they have, you know, their hips have a chance to move through like a semi-ish range of motion. Whereas shoulder stuff, you're basically like, most people don't even really go overhead unless they're grabbing like an upper cabinet thing, and that'll turn into like this really quick because they can't get here, right? So that's what, again, I would just bring it back to like alignment and where does that like scap and glenohumeral joint live on top of the thoracic cage? Like, what is that relationship?
A bit back to stacking, but
now just upper body. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up shoulder because that's such an interesting one. You might be noticing this with some of the group that you work with. I work with, I'm coaching track with a lot of athletes who are high school age.
Okay.
We are noticing really interesting things because they're sitting so much more and they're not playing. They're not outside doing those regular movement patterns. And, you know, we've all seen devices introduced to babies.
Right. Yeah.
iPads, things like that. That
just keep them quiet.
Yeah. We just got to keep them quiet. We know all about that. That
I've chosen a different path. So I do not know, but I've heard
that a baby would now be hunched over an iPad for a significant period of time, which we've never seen before.
Yeah.
And that, of course, shoulders are probably moving a little bit forward. I was going to say anterior, but let's say forward for layman's terms, that we're getting a lot more of this hunched posture, which we can live with until we have to reach and go do something. Or we go to the gym, and I see this all the time, overhead lifts that people just don't have the range of motion to do a proper overhead lift. And then that's when we see a lot of this tendinosis. So it's such an interesting thing. And I think everyone should be thinking about that.
I work with very few people, or have worked with very few people who like cold can just put their arm over their head properly, right? Like to keep a rib cage stacked over pelvis.
Yeah.
To have the upward rotation of a scap, to have a serratus that can grab that, to have external rotation needed here. Like, it's pretty rare to see someone that hasn't worked towards that just coming off an office job and like nail it. And so, not that it's like I don't really like the prerequisite world because people like it's very like gatekeepy, but like it does make a bit of sense. I mean, people move different with load, so it's also hard to gauge that. Like the FMS stuff, and I'm like not super big on some of that because you see it can be so manipulated in the moment. You can give someone a perfect pattern by giving them like 10 pounds or just cueing it differently, and you're like, you're not a better mover now. I just gamed the system a bit, right? So but at the same time, if someone like doesn't have the joints to even get there, and then to load it is like, well, that's obviously going to cause some problems. So, but yeah, just to bring it back to the hip thing, it's like if a person never experiences like actual hip extension because they sit all day, they also never experience full hip flexion. They just stay at 90 and they stand up, but they're still kind of like pulled into that. That person's gonna have hip issues or back issues, just like the person that's shoulder never like goes through any range other than this very small portion of it. And then you ask it to do something far outside of that range with weight on it, like you can see where that goes,
Serve a
right?
tennis ball or something. Yeah. Okay. My final question.
This is your
I
second
know.
final question.
That was like a double down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
I'm doubling.
That's a Stacy.
I'm learning.
I'm doubling down on questions. You've done this for a long time, this type of training, and I'm interested in your personal journey in a way, just like what part of it meant the most to you or made the most difference to you? Did you come to it because of an injury? Did you just want to be a better mover? Like, what's your story? That's what
that's almost its own podcast, but I'll do my best. So yeah, my like quick athletic background on myself. I used to be 265 pounds, big boy, played football at a pretty high level. I was on scholarship at Western for a few years, played Team Canada, like 19 under national team. Football was like definitely my thing. That led to, and that was in a much bigger body with no knowledge of like anything that we've just said, right? It was just like bench, squat, deadlift, run occasionally, sometimes move sideways, get strong, get big, whatever.
Very common.
Of course. I had, which was like misfortune at the time, but turned out to be fortune. So many injuries. I had like 2 tendon repair surgeries, grade 2 AC separation, grade 2 hamstring.
Wow.
Like, and ended up spending about 2.5 years of my like 3-year college career, just like rehabbing and trying to do this stuff, right?
We get it.
So came from like a position where my body was always hurt. This also, I didn't know what I was trying to do after school. Like football is very like kind of put the blinders on and all consuming. And so you're like, I don't need to think about life after. I'm just going to play some ball. Spend more time just rehabbing in the gym and trying to learn about body stuff. And then when I left, I came here. Like I'm from Ottawa initially. I moved to Toronto just as a fresh start. Was like, want to get something cooking. And landed at Equinox, which was awesome. And that provided me some good networking opportunities. But I was pretty green as a trainer. Like I'd done kin stuff at school and I was always familiar with like the football style of working out, but to then just go train general pop and turn that into a career was
right.
So just
very
started
different.
Soaking up as much like education as I could. And then I think within a few years, I kind of found my groove as like not the strength trainer, but like the mobility guy. Cause I was coming off of like 4 years of very intense, like football training, which was just like bench, squat, dead, get your numbers up. And so I was also kind of burnt out and fried from it mentally. Like I just didn't have an interest. I'd also lost a bunch of weight at this point. And so my numbers were like a quarter of what they were before. And I just didn't, I was like, I don't need to go bench 225 like 3 times when I did it for like whatever in my first year.
Right.
And just, body hurt. And I know this was the first time in like years where I didn't have to work out for a certain thing. I was allowed to like just work out. And I was like, oh, cool. I'll just explore a bunch of stuff then because this is fun. And I don't have to put this number up at spring camp or whatever, right? So I actually lost like a bunch of weight. I was much thinner than I currently am and just got super into like moving because it was something I couldn't do before. I was very strong and stiff. And it was like, well, now I've got all this time and I want to learn and I want my body to feel different stuff. So I went down like the FRC path and all the like mobility type things. And then, just ended up taking DNS exercise 1, flew out to Vancouver for it, put myself up and just was like, let's do this thing. And I just really was attracted to that style of teaching, had an awesome instructor as well. But to be honest, I remember almost getting frustrated in that course because I was like, this is just so much like new stuff that's like approached very clinically. And
right.
This would have been like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. So I also didn't have my business in a spot where it is now, different population base I worked with. And I was kind of like, how does this apply to like what I'm trying to do?
Right.
And so I thought it was awesome, but I walked away almost like frustrated. I need to be able to like get stuff right away, or otherwise I freak out. So I sat on it for like years without like I would slowly implement things. And then I would watch a bunch of videos and just like, there's such a nuanced practical component. And then, I think probably 3 years after that, I took my level 2. And I guess to peel it back is that I exposed myself to like every piece of education out there. This one just landed where I was like, that makes the most sense, like science wise and in my own body. And then it just, basically became the antithesis of like really heavy, boring powerlifting or strength training, and was like, here's how to just make stuff not hurt. And then you can do whatever you want.
I love it.
with your body, because I just
And-
spent a long time in chronic pain. So it was like,
Yeah.
whatever
And
that-
are you finding now that you're using these techniques on yourself that your body feels better?
yeah, I mean, I sit here right now with like back pain and a little bit of overweightness going on, but that's my fault. Yeah, I'm just
we all
like,
do. We
I'm
all
just, yeah, no, you guys are great. But yes, like I'm not at a phase where it's a lot of fun to train myself, because my brain is just like turning myself into my 10th client of the day or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm so neurotic around stuff. I also came off like a couple of years ago, I had this really random like bypass surgery. I had a big vascular situation go on.
So you're recovering from that.
There was like a
and-
year before diagnosis and a year after the surgery
Right.
where things were like really
That's-
not normal.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
And so I think I also got super hyped, because before I knew what it was, we thought it was just all this alignment based
Right.
stuff. And so I was so like neurotic around that stuff. And then pre all the Western injuries, I did have just a really bad, like my left SI joint from like grade 9 has been sort of my like kryptonite. So yeah, I think I'm just always very aware when I'm doing stuff myself. And I think I pass that neuroses on to my clients, which is why they stick around. But yeah, there's not a lot of times I'm just like slinging it. It's kind of like,
right.
which I
is
need
great.
to work. I need to work
Yeah,
on, because it
yeah.
gets. But yes, so no, I apply everything that I've talked about. I think I can only apply practically with other people, because I've spent so much time on it myself.
Working through it
Yeah.
on your own,
Yeah.
and you've had so many of the injuries that you
Yeah, it's kinda
you
funny,
understand
like-
what it feels like, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
great. That's
there's-
great.
There's like, well, because then you really nerd out on like that one area and all the potentials. And I mean, there's 2 meniscus tears. Like the body's been through a lot. And so it's nice because someone will come up and you're kind of like, perfect.
I know what
Yeah,
that
You
feels
fall
like.
into this
Yeah,
category
exactly. I
or
know what
whatever,
that
right?
feels like.
So in some ways it's good, because it gave me a lot of exposure.
Yeah, experience. That's a
Fantastic.
big difference. Scott, thank you so much.
No problem.
People definitely should be listening to you and your approach. I think it's great. Oh, by the way, you can use that soundbite in your marriage. People should listen to you.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, feel
I'm
free.
just going to have that on a speaker, like running in the background when Em walks home. Yeah. Anytime she gives me any disagreements.
Yeah.
No.
Good luck with that.
As long as you
Good
promise
luck
to
with
do
that.
one for me.
No, I know my role both here and in the marriage. So we were good. But thank you. Yeah, no,
Thank
always
you.
nice to talk shop, and you guys are awesome. So
That
thank you.
was fantastic.
Thanks. Great.
Totally.
Thanks for listening to the Totum Wellness Podcast. Please follow us on Apple, Google, or Spotify and leave a 5-star review and comment. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, and please spread the word to family and friends.